Hey everyone, and welcome back to the International Airport of Todos Santos. Last time we built the runways, the terminals, and a few other things, and today we're going to embark on the process of detailing. This is going to be at least 2 videos. Today we're going to take care of the landside details, so something resembling this area. As you might expect, we're beginning with lots and lots of parking lots. It's not exactly how I would design an airport if I were designing my own in a perfect world, but sometimes you see photographs of the exteriors of airports and there are just like miles and miles of cars. I think regardless of whether or not that's a good idea to have an airport be planned that way, I think it's an iconic look. So we're going to go for that, and we're going to be building several parking lots that will hopefully achieve that effect. I'm going to try to make them as interesting and different from each other as possible, and all the ones that are boring and repetitive, I'm just going to cut out that footage. So this one is interesting because it's right up against that construction site that we built last episode. So they're in the process of connecting these 2 terminals with this giant trench that they've dug, and they've begun filling in with various things. I really don't know how airports are constructed, so I'm just kind of pretending that that's how it works. But anyway, it's up against the construction site, so there's a little bit of fresh dirt kicked up there, and we're going to add some details as well. Again, I really don't know what an airport construction site would look like, so I'm just going to use kind of generic construction assets and hope that it all works out. I think I was probably a little too sparse with the construction site details, so that might be something I'll have to come back and adjust. In fact, I'm thinking I might do like an entire episode of just fixing stuff at the airport because I've been getting so many good suggestions. I've already finished the build, but have not finished recording the commentary or editing the videos, obviously. So yeah, maybe we'll come back and do some fixes. Let me know what you think, or if you have any other suggestions as we go through the course of the build. We're going to have a lot of strangely shaped spaces like this in between parking lots and terminals and that kind of space. So I try to do different things here and there. In this case, we're doing a little plaza just to welcome you from the barren land of the parking lot to the somewhat more pleasant international terminal. One thing I rediscovered over the course of doing this build was these curb networks. They were really useful when they were originally released. We didn't have anything like IMT or anything like that at the time, so they were really good for doing this kind of decorative work. But then I kind of got tired of them because I didn't think they were as flexible as doing stuff with IMT or PO. But now I realized that with Node Controller, you can go in and you can adjust the shape, you can sharpen the corners, and you can end up making some really interesting shapes. These are a little more abstract or experimental for this plaza because it's kind of meant to draw your eye as you enter the airport. But we're going to make use of it for some more standard things later, and it ends up looking really nice. But we'll see some examples of that in just a minute. Of course, there's nothing more confusing than airport parking, so I wanted to have the entrance here be a little convoluted. So you enter into it on this right lane and you get to this booth, and then you can go around the loop road. It's a 2-way road, so you can go around in either direction. You can just keep looping around and around if you want. And then the exit is kind of offset here over by the main airport loop road. So it really makes sense when you look at it from above, but I imagine like driving in here, it might be a little bit confusing where you're supposed to go. How are you supposed to navigate the parking lot? One major issue with doing all these parking lots is that the demand for the actual Sims in their vehicles to drive here and park just isn't there. We don't have that kind of demand. So I decided to make non-functional parking lots for the most part. We are going to have some functional ones in certain areas, but where I wanted it to look like there's this sea of cars just permanently parked, we're going to be making static parking lots with parking lot decals and car props. I start by using IMT, but it gets a little unwieldy to have tons and tons of rules added to the same road. So after the first couple rows, I just go back to using plain old decals, copying and pasting with Move It. And when I was struggling to try to figure out how to fill in all these spaces, this is where I figured out that you could just very subtly adjust these networks to get them to perfectly fill in awkward spaces like this. So wherever I want this sharp corner, I just do the sharpen corners function of node controller, and then you can also extend the corner offset to get nice smooth curves. For the smaller end caps, I just use the prop versions because it's just about the right size. And then where you have this sort of taper of the parking lots, I just use a stripe decal. Of course, we need to adjust the people mover supports to not be overlapping multiple spots, so I just move them a little bit and block them off so people know not to park there, just in case they didn't realize that the giant pillar being in the way was reason enough not to park there. Now here's what I'm talking about with using car props. There are some problems with this. One, it counts towards our prop limit, which could theoretically be an issue. Two, I'm not a huge fan of some of the color variations of some of these cars, so I have to go in and change the colors manually, which is not my favorite thing to do, I have to say. And the results aren't that great, but I think it's better than having the same bright yellow Jeep appear every few parking spaces. I actually like that color in particular. It just doesn't seem like the sort of color and car combination that you would see multiple times in the same parking lot. I apologize for spending 6 whole minutes on a single parking lot. I think that's just going to be the sort of episode this is. So with that out of the way, let's build another parking lot. I'm going to use the same technique, except this time I'm going to use the parking lot roads snapping tool to get these parking spots perfectly lined up, just using those as a template so that we can spread out these cars in a realistic way. I also have to turn these into POs instead of just using normal props because the parking lot roads are sunken just a little bit below ground level. So if you lower the props down, they don't stay, they kind of pop back up to ground level, whereas the POs will stay sunken down at the right elevation. Okay, what makes this parking lot unique is that it has, it's slightly more pedestrian friendly than the other one. It has these medians, just by nature of using the parking lot roads, you get these concrete medians in the middle. So I wanted to use that as some inspiration for detailing. So we have some little walkways that go down the center, and they cross over to the sidewalk on the other side of the road. We'll represent that visually with some crosswalks in just a second. And then just clean up these medians because obviously they look very messy right now. So I'm just going to use pretty much the exact same techniques I used for that one section of grass median before, figuring out the number of nodes I need, drawing out the network, and then shaping it with node controller and move it. And any empty spots in the middle, it can just fill in with some props. Makes it nice and easy to finish those off. It's pretty tedious, but I think the result, we'll be able to see that more at the end of the episode after we've done some more of this. Like the overall look of it when you look down at the airport, it just makes it look a lot cleaner and a lot more realistic because you don't get this ugly sort of clipping, ugly random ground textures sticking up, just generally less ugly, more good. So I did the rest of the parking lot off camera. Looks a little something like this. Some of the LODs don't look too good, but really there's only so much I can do. We need to do a little bit more landscaping because I hate the ruining texture. That's a theme that's going to come up a lot this episode. So I'm going to be using IMT and PO, implementing some ploppable grass props that match the grass texture of my map theme, and covering up all this ugliness at the side of the roads. And while I'm at it, also going to add some crash barriers and other details that you would expect from this sort of road system. Over the course of this build, I kind of went back and forth between going for a more minimal style of landscaping and going for something a little bit more like a garden. So right here, I'm leaning very heavily into the garden side of things, way too much. We're going to thin this out by at least 50% in terms of the amount of foliage. And I think as we go on, I'm going to progress more toward the minimal side of things. So we're going to make some changes at some point, and I think the result is a lot nicer. So we have the areas that are landscaped and are more like a garden are going to really stand out. So we have like the airport sign here, and then we have this little triangle in between the two sides of road here as you enter the airport. So those really draw your eye, but then the rest of the grass medians and other areas of grass are just going to be a lot plainer. It's just going to be grass with a few trees here and there. And I think it is a nicer balance that way. But we'll get back to that later. First, we're going to take a little break and go over here. It is airport related. It's just a little bit removed from the rest of the airport. And what it is a satellite parking lot. So this would be the super cheap parking compared to what you can get in the airport proper. So it's located at this old dock, and obviously is a terminal stop for a ferry line, like we saw last episode. And I'm thinking this was originally an industrial dock where goods could be transported up and down the river, because this area did used to be a booming industrial area. So now it's not really used as a dock anymore other than for the ferry, and it's just a wharf that you could walk along. And then there's a row of airport-related businesses, rental car offices, that sort of thing as well. Of course, to get to and from this parking lot or the rental car offices, there's also an airport shuttle. So I'm just making a quick bus line and having a couple of these shuttles run back and forth. The lot itself is pretty straightforward. There is quite a slope here, so it's a little bit hard to build a parking lot. At first I tried a tiered design, but that didn't work at all, so I ended up just going with a pretty typical parking lot roads lot. I just need to bridge the elevation gap using some retaining walls and foliage, and then we're good to go and start some detailing. This obviously isn't the focus of the episode, so I just wanted to go fairly light on the details, just enough to give this place a little bit of character. So with the satellite lot done, I just needed to fill in this suburban area in between that and the neighborhood that we've already built. And now it's time to go back to the airport proper and do something other than parking. It's still going to involve cars, though. There isn't much in the way of plane activity over on this side of the airport, so instead of reserving the space for all kinds of apron detailing in the next episode, we're going to fill it in with some landside stuff. So I figured, because we already have two gigantic parking lots, I would use this for a couple of different landside activities. The main build over here is going to involve the car rental facilities, but first we're going to start with the area where deliveries are made to the airport. Now, I looked high and low across the internet and could not find anything detailing how deliveries are made to all of the shops that operate within the airport, in particular the ones that operate on the other side of security, on the air side. The closest thing I could find was someone who talked about seeing a McDonald's delivery box go through airport security, but that didn't really give me a clue as to how things work in general. So I just kind of made it up, and we have a pretty generic looking delivery area here, and I figured that they would have some sort of security system where all these packages would be checked before crossing the secure line. So I used a generic but functional warehouse building, so we can actually get some truck traffic going to and from this area. And we also have a little security gate here, which isn't fully detailed yet, obviously, but we're going to get to that in a second. So we have this road that passes by the delivery area, and that is also going to provide access to the apron eventually at some point. Obviously, all the airside details are going to be next episode, so we're going to connect these two things together then. But for now, I did just want to test the waters on what these boundaries are going to look like between the secure side and the non-secure side of the airport. This is another thing I couldn't really find too much information on, at least direct information. A lot of entrances like this seem to just be single gates, but I thought it would be kind of cool to do like an Arctic entry style, where we have two parallel fences, two parallel gates. So you get in here, you pass through one gate, then you check in with the security guard or whoever's working there, and then you can pass through the next one onto the apron for whatever business you have to take care of there. So for now, we're going to leave the secure entrance as it is. That's something we're going to develop more, obviously, in the airside details episode next time. But for now, we're moving on to the main rental car facilities. Obviously, last episode, we talked about how in the parking garage is the main rental car area where you would pick up and drop off the vehicles themselves. But of course, you need a lot more real estate to actually maintain and store cars. So we're going to have a whole lot of parked rental cars here. We're going to have a maintenance facility, which is this set of buildings here that I'm clipping together, and a couple other services as well, but we'll get to those in a second. So initially, this space was just one giant paved over, flat, barren land of nothingness. And they've used different barriers and fences and road markings to mark it up into the various types of spaces that they've needed to fit in these buildings and all these parked cars and all the other stuff we're going to get to as well. So I'm using we have these two parallel roads here that are broken up by this barrier, and then of course we just have these plain areas of concrete that have been painted over with these kind of weird lines to designate an area for all the parked cars. And really, I think that's just going to give it the feeling that they've realized that they're going to need flexibility in terms of how they use these spaces over the years. So if there was maybe they added intercity bus service or more intercity trains to the airport, I could see them reducing the amount of space that's used for rental cars, especially some of the space that's used for all these parked cars that I'm currently putting down. And they could change that into a surface level bus station, or more space for taxis, or more parking, or something like that. The point is that I just wanted it to look a little bit more freeform and a bit less like there are these different dedicated pockets that have different unique looks. Across from that sea of rental cars, we have the refueling area. So if you forget to refuel your rental car before you return it, they can just fill it up here and charge you that times 10 or whatever multiplier they put onto the price of the gas. And next to that, we have the main administration. So this is where they would take care of all their office related stuff, but also this is probably where you would go if you had some major problem with your rental and you needed to talk to someone a little higher up. I guess all these businesses share office space in here. I don't know how they all get along, but I guess they do. I mostly just did that because I think it looks cool to have all these signs stacked on top of one another. And I thought it was so cool that I didn't just want to have it here facing away from the main road. I wanted to take this little pillar thingy that has this nice tiled texture on it and take these signs and post them down here as well, so you can see who you're dealing with when you're driving by on the main airport loop road. In contrast to what I was talking about before with the development of this plot of land, the areas around the buildings are a little more developed. So they have a little bit of landscaping to just kind of demarcate the parking lots from the roads. The next landside activity that goes on over here is, well, a little bit more parking. So we have this area of parking lot that's connected to the other side of the airport road, to all those parking lots via a small bridge that I made off camera. So I'm thinking that this is one example of how this area has changed in use over the years. So this used to all just be long-term parking all the way back here. These would be the absolute cheapest spots. Almost no one would ever park here because you'd still be paying quite a bit, but you'd be really, really far away. It's hard to get to, just generally annoying. So they've kind of cut this in half, and then on one half it's still used just kind of as a spare parking lot in case they need some overflow parking. And then this other part that I'm adding these parking spots into now would be a waiting lot, a cell phone waiting lot, or whatever you want to call it. So if you were picking someone up, you would, instead of waiting at the terminal, you would come here, park here, and then once the flight has landed and everybody's off and ready to get picked up, then you would drive from there over to the terminal. And I think that's a pretty common thing at airports to reduce congestion at the terminals. Kind of makes sense. So with all those things done, all the details down, we just need to fill in all this pavement with some pavement. Actually, there's still a little bit left to do with a few decals here and there, some lighting as well. A little bit of foliage just to kind of flesh out these landscaped areas. I thought I'd also light up this sign while I was here, which I think looks pretty nice, actually. Some signage, mostly just stop signs, actually. And finally, to finish this area off, we're going to work on this entrance and just add a few details. It's not going to be a fully secured entrance. This isn't like a critical airport area or anything like that. Just really so you don't get lost and get in the way of the rental car operations. I have this little grass median. I thought this intersection just looked a little bit too big, so we have this grass median in between here to kind of direct you into the entrance. And then I'm just using one of these parking cover thingies, which I think draws your eye and also points out that this is the entrance to this area. And just to bring it all together, I'm gonna spruce it up a little bit with some foliage and add these things. Don't know what they're called, but they're like the little rounded spikes that stick up and keep you from driving in through that way. You can only drive out. And so as you drive over, the little curved part depresses it and allows you to drive over, assuming you're going the correct direction. If you're trying to go the wrong way, it slashes your tires. Then you get stuck there, which seems like it would hold up traffic more than driving the wrong direction. But anyway, moving over here, we're doing a sort of related build, which is going to be a little taxi depot. Obviously, we're going to have lots of taxis coming and going. I think it makes sense to have some taxis stationed here, and we're also going to have a little office as well, kind of similar to the rental car facility, where if you had some problem or whatever, you needed to wait for a while for the company to take care of something, you would come to this office, I guess. Now, I thought this area here was a little bit too green and a little bit too landscaped looking for the airport. We're going for concrete, pavement, barren, stuff like that. So we're going to remove all the foliage, delete that, remove it from existence, and build a parking lot filled with taxis. Since we happen to have this overpass ramp here, I thought it'd be kind of cool to have these taxis lined up partially underneath it. I think that just looks kind of cool, kind of looks like it's hidden away down here in this little alcove. I'm mostly using the same taxi prop, sprinkling in a few of these other ones just for variety. I'm just trying to make it look slightly orderly. I don't really know the details of how taxi depots work, but this is how the ones in Todos Santos work. They just have them all lined up here, ready to go. This is a place that would have lots and lots of traffic just constantly going in and out, so I wanted to represent that with these wear decals, just going in a little loop around where the taxis are kept. And then finally, to actually create all this traffic, I have this invisible taxi depot. I'm going to get these same models of taxis spawning out of here, plus these moto taxis because I think they look awesome. And I'm going to clip that right into the building so we can get taxis coming in and out, which I think looks really nice, adds a nice little bit of life to the airport. Now, I did quite a bit of detailing on the terminal and the parking garage area last episode, just kind of these structural details and a few of these vehicles as well. But I wanted to supplement that because I felt like it still wasn't quite at the place that I wanted it. A lot of that has to do with the amount of traffic that comes and goes. Obviously, we are getting some cars going through, which I'm really happy about. I wasn't sure we were going to get private vehicles driving across these roads, but it still isn't quite enough to evoke the level of busyness that I want to have. So, I mean, if you ever pick someone up at the airport in a car, usually you're going to find that it's like totally packed on the arrivals deck. So I'm going to have at least 2 lanes of cars here. I think there's one space we're going to do later where it's like 3 wide of just constant gridlock, people waiting for their passengers. And of course, we need to use Traffic Manager to block off people from driving in those lanes because that wouldn't quite look right, I don't think. We have to do the same thing up on the departures deck. And for all of these, like I mentioned earlier, we have to use procedural objects for these. Otherwise, they're not going to stay at the proper level. So that was pretty straightforward and easy, and I think the final result is really nice. We get all these parked cars plus the vehicles that are driving through. I think it adds a nice bit of life. And the parking garage as well. It just has some little bits and pieces here and there that need to be cleaned up. So in between the sidewalks and the grass, I'm using IMT to add some curb networks just to make a nice, sharp, clean line. And then to cover up the ruining texture, which is something we're going to be dealing with quite a bit in this episode, I'm using some ploppable grass just to cover that up and make it look nice and a little bit more well-maintained, which I think you'd expect from an airport of this type and scale. I also wanted to make the on-site rental car office a little bit more interesting. So we have this little pull through here. We're going to clean up some of the sidewalks as well, add some foliage, and some planters and benches to the outside of the building just to make it look a little bit more welcoming. Just like with the more distant rental car lot, I wanted to identify which businesses are here, just to make it a little bit easier to find, although some of them are kind of hidden under this eaves here, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. In between the rental car office and this lobe of the parking garage, I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I just decided to make a pretty simple plaza. Using these Ipanema sidewalk decals, I believe by Ronix, turning them into POs so I can line them up nice and easily so we can get this nice repeated pattern, and arranging some doors and awnings as well, just to integrate it a little bit more into the building and make it look like it'll serve as a nice entrance into the parking garage. As nice as an entrance into a parking garage can be, at least. I'm going to use the same benches and planters as with the rental car building. Move this road back so we don't have cars driving on the plaza, and it's still looking a little bit bare and awkward, so I'm just going to make a little fountain as well using this lovely functional fountain prop. Then I'm going to add 1 palm tree, and then we're going to move on to this area. Now, instead of just filling this with something functional, I decided just to make a path that kind of winds through this grassy area, which I guess is functional in a way, but not in the same way as some of the other stuff we've been building. I'm dealing with the same problems I was talking about before, using curb networks and ploppable grass, mostly in IMT in this case, to make this path look nice and clean. It's pretty easy to take care of that when the lines are straight, but where we have these rounded roads, I'm using round ploppable grass props in IMT, reducing the step to a very small amount so that it basically looks like one curved line. And I think that's probably the easiest way to cover up the ruining texture in that kind of situation. Hopping up to the second level of the terminal, we have this sunken plaza that we made last episode. And I thought it was looking a little plain, so I wanted this to kind of be more of a focal point on the arrivals deck. So I'm taking this I Heart Rochester sign by Gaseous Stranger, and we're going to completely delete the Rochester part because obviously that's not where we are, and we're going to create our own I Heart sign for Todos Santos. This is inspired by one that you can find at the San Juan airport, so I thought it would be a nice reference to have our own version here. It was kind of hard to color match these different assets. I don't think I fully succeeded in doing that. I had to change it a few different times, but I think it's close enough that I'm not going to worry about it too much. I thought it would be a little cuter to have these kind of askew and look like they're about to topple over. Just make it a little bit more eye-catching. I also couldn't find a suitable base until I stumbled across this grave asset. So it is standing on top of a grave, I guess. I don't make of that what you will. And then you kind of have this these 2 entrances defined by the monorail pillar here. So I thought it looked a little unbalanced to just have one thing over on one side, so I just add a little transit map on the other. Finally, the pillar itself was looking a little just ugly or out of place, so I just added a little concrete base in the form of this planter. Now we have something that I have been looking forward to for the whole build, which is all the road signage. So everything from the freeway leading up to the airport, to the interchange, to the airport roads themselves, of course. We're going to add some signage, and we're going to use PO to add the proper wording and directions to every single one of these signs. This isn't usually the sort of detail I go into on this series, just because there's so much ground we need to cover, but for this kind of climactic project of the series, I wanted to go in and do this kind of thing, because I think it's just going to add a lot to the silhouette of the airport. When you kind of look at it from a distance, you can see all these signs poking up, but also just the overall atmosphere, color scheme, that sort of stuff. When you're down in first-person view, I'm just thinking of all these cinematics I want to capture. I think having the proper designations and wording on all these signs is going to go a long way to adding another dimension to those sorts of shots. As for all the wording in particular that I'm using for this, I'm pretty much taking it all directly from the San Juan airport, as well as all the Spanish terms. Obviously, we have a bilingual signage set up here, with Spanish catering to the locals and English catering to any non-Spanish speaker who is flying in, which would probably be a large proportion of the flights coming in here, bringing all the tourists to Todos Santos. Well, not all of them, because we have a giant cruise ship port, but anyway, you know what I mean. I'm using a good number of assets and procedural objects fonts for this project. If you're interested in seeing those, I made a collection on the workshop of all the assets that I downloaded exclusively to use at the airport, so you can go check that out and they'll be in there. I think there are 4 or 5 different things that I downloaded for the road signs in particular. So I set up the gantries with these monotube gantry assets, and then I use PO to make sure that they're perfectly lined up, and I extend one out so that they kind of meet in the middle and they create a single span that goes across the freeway. Then for the most part, to continue adding on all these signs, I'm just copying and pasting the different signs that I need and adjusting the wording as needed. Now, I ran into a problem here. I tried to write área de espera, which normally would have an accent on the A, but it doesn't show up on the sign. So I tried getting clever and making it my own accent out of a little dash and rotating it and putting it above the A. And for some reason, PO really doesn't like that. It crashed the entire game, and I lost all the sign-making progress that I had already made. And this is something that I can replicate. For some reason, taking that single dash, making it really small and rotating it just crashes the game. So we're not going to have any accents, unfortunately, so it's not going to be completely accurate. It's going to look a little weird, but hopefully you understand why I don't want to spend hours and hours of my life troubleshooting how to make an accent in a video game. Anyway, I rebuilt all the stuff that you had already seen and continued on with the signage, but something started bugging me, which was that the landscaping around the road just doesn't look that good. There's a little bit of a mishmash of different textures. It's not very clean, and the ruining texture just kind of ruins it. So hopefully you see what I meant before when I said that we were going to move away from a more heavily landscape thing and just go a little bit easier on it. I think it gives everything a little bit more room to breathe, and it just feels less cramped, and it kind of helps just give the proper scale to things because there's a little bit of negative space to give it some context. So I'm going to take that whole theme and just use IMT to add some more ploppable grass to the edge of most of the roads and fill in all these areas to make these nice grass medians. And there will be a few trees and bushes here and there, but for the most part, I'm just going for plain grass. And I think it's much cleaner looking, much nicer overall. So with that distraction out of the way, we're going to go back to the signage. I did run into a small problem where when I used PO to copy one of these signs that contains text, the version that I copy it from goes black for some reason and completely loses its texture, which is kind of annoying, but it's pretty easy to fix. Just go back into PO and hit edit and then close out of it and it'll come back. I don't know why that happens, but it's just something that I had to deal with. Beyond that, it's pretty straightforward to finish off the signage. Basically just trying to give the drivers enough warning so they know what the next exit is going to be. They know if they want to get to, say, downtown Todos Santos, they probably want to be somewhere in the middle 2 lanes. If they want to get to the international terminal, they'll be in this lane. If they want to park, they'll be in this lane. If they want to go around the loop and start all over again, they'll want to be on the left and take that exit. It can get a little old to be this precise, especially when you have to do it over and over again, often using the same things with just slight changes, saying, you basically have the same text, but this time it's on an exit-only sign, so you basically have to remake it from scratch. That sort of thing, doing it over and over again, can get a little bit old. So this is, I think you can see why I'm not doing this for the whole city of Todos Santos, because I would have to do hundreds and hundreds of these things, and it would take hours and hours and hours. So as much as I would like to do it, I don't think for a project of this scale, it's feasible to do that. Anyway, doing all these signs made me realize just kind of how convoluted some of the road and interchange decisions that I made were. Like, we have this weird thing where one of the ramps, you exit right, but then you eventually go left, and then the lane next to it, you exit left, but then you go right, and they kind of cross over each other. It's kind of convoluted to put into signage. So I just did my best to try to get something that looks reasonable. Obviously, no one is actually depending on these signs, so I don't really care about being super accurate, but I'd like to have something that at least looks believable. I'm not sure about having these directional signs were in an exit-only lane. I'm not sure if that really matters, or if that's redundant. It kind of looks wrong. I should maybe check that against some real-world signs, but for now, that's what we have. And I also wanted to apply all of these to the freeway leading up to the airport and the interchange as well, because it basically involves all the same destinations and the similar types of signs, so I can just copy and paste some of these assets and use a similar logic to all the airport signs. And then there are just a couple of miscellaneous signs here, like we have some chevrons on this sharp curve on the cloverleaf ramp that leads up to the airport from the freeway, and a couple of other freeway signs as well. Another sort of signage that we're going to do is billboards. Of course, there are plenty of billboards in San Juan, so I wanted to kind of evoke that without maybe going too over the top. So we're just going to have a few ones that are relevant to the airport. So we have this nice little Sim-Air billboard, which is going to align with one of the airlines that we're going to have in the airport. And then I went ahead and made a couple of custom travel billboards, letting people know that they can visit some of the other cities that I've created on this channel. So we have Alpenglow, and then I also made one for Northrim Creek, the very first series on this channel. So I'm just taking a random billboard prop and using PO to add these custom textures. I did write these in Spanish, so if the wording isn't perfect, please let me know, and I might make some adjustments. Now, I wanted to add some sort of mural at the airport, but there wasn't really a good spot for it. So I thought one place I could use was this one over here, because I didn't really like how it looked anyway, so I figured I could just remodel the whole area and add in a place for a little mural. I basically had to remake it from scratch because I have this weird glitch with IMT where anytime I would make more than 3 rules on a single line, some of the settings would just not be available for these rules. So I basically had to delete the rules and build them again, which is kind of annoying. I don't know why that happens or if there's a way to fix it. Maybe it's user error, I don't know. Anyway, I had to remake this whole section from scratch, and I think it had some improvement along the way as well. It's a little more set back, so there's more space for passengers to be dropped off, which I think is nice. I think that's one of the biggest criticisms I'd have of this terminal, is that there's not enough sidewalk space for most of it. But anyway, because we have this little setback now, I can add in this mural overlooking anyone who's sitting on this bench here. And with the signage done, we just have one more stop before we can get to the cinematics, and that is lighting. Obviously, there's already plenty of lighting here. Some of it comes along with the road networks that we put down. Some of them are already plopped down in the parking lots, but it's not quite enough. I really want this place to have a punchy, bright look at night. So obviously, we're going to add a whole lot of lights. So that's it for lighting. That's it for the Landside details. I'll let you guess what we're going to be doing next episode. Other than that, let me know what you thought. Even if I'm not able to implement all your wonderful ideas, I'm sure that we can all learn something from bouncing ideas off of this build. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know these airport builds are a little bit longer, so if you stuck all the way through, thank you so much for watching. We're going to do something a little different for the cinematics. Hope you enjoy. Bye.